Hello everyone, my name's Norithix, better known as Nori. I am a digital artist. I have over 20 years of experience and I'm going to show you how I make art. I'm going to take you through it one step at a time, show you from the very start to the very finish. And I want to stress before I start that this is not, how you're supposed to do art. I'm hoping that as I show you things that I can dispel the notion that there is a way that you need to do art, singular. And that instead this could make you more versatile in art in general. So, first up, you may notice that I have a whole lot of folders full of layers. So it's a meme among artists that you end up with a ton of layers. You just keep making new layers and layers and layers. I prefer to have a template file that I create, and it has folders full of layers that I use for my process throughout. And that way, all the layers are made before I start, so I don't have to waste my time making a bunch of layers, renaming a bunch of layers, doing all that administrative BS throughout the process. So the first thing I have here is my line sketch. Now this, you shouldn't spend any time on this. You should spend as little time on this as possible. You don't have to be accurate. You should strive to be just as loose as you can be. And then, because basically you're not going to be keeping any of this. What's going on in this layer is not going to be kept anywhere. This is not going in the final product. I like a nice loose line sketch. Nothing too complicated. I use this same brush a lot for my line work in general. Here are all of my settings. You can pause the video and see them for yourself if you'd like. Mostly I would just say try to find a brush that you like. Go into your tablet settings. That's another thing. Go into your tablet settings and turn off set the brush to soft, more towards soft, because the default settings I find on tablets have it set way too hard. You have to press way too hard on the tablet in order to make the line the full width, the full breadth, the full opacity. It's not necessary. Well, now that we've got our line sketch, we will go to the blob phase. Now, blob composition is the same thing. You just use very big brushes to sort of sculpt a shape for you. Now I'm making a blob character with this. I'm drawing a blob named Gropey from my sci-fi adventure novel, Partners 2541. You can read that if you like. I know I certainly would like it. But regardless, this is just, as you can see, it's a very simple process. You just create a shape using thick brushes, just thick as you please. And I like to spend a little bit more time in this than probably a lot of people do, because I like to recycle it a little bit sometimes, depending on what I'm drawing. Okay, that's him. That's his body. I'm going to go on the next layer. I'm going to draw his eye that floats in the middle of his body. That's nice. You can just use the circular brush. Makes it easy. And then I'm going to draw the leaf that he's snacking on. Gropey is a vegetarian. He will not eat you. He's actually a very nice boy. Okay. Now we have our blob sketch. Now you can use different colors like I did. I'm using it mostly for clarity's sake. You see, I created folders ahead of time that have blob 1, blob 2, blob 3. Usually I use that to denote different characters, because what makes blob composition a little bit difficult is when you have something that's in front of something else, like his eye. And obviously if you try to draw something inside of itself, you know, doesn't work. Doesn't make much sense. So you have multiple layers. I like to keep them at 50%. And that makes things a little easier in order to see the overlap. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go up past our color. And I have a layer called Body Shine because I like to use a shine layer inside of the color layers. We'll talk about that in a minute. So this is the line folder. Let me just reduce the opacity of the sketch there. Now I have the lines. I have a character here. If I had multiple characters in the picture, I would just duplicate this layer and bam, you've got all these layers again. I only have one though, so I don't need them. Now, usually at this point, this is the part where everybody starts to hate drawing. And they go, man, I wish I didn't have to ink everything. I have to go over all the lines. No matter how hard I try, the outlines are never as good as what I did. Or sometimes they're better, you know? Sometimes you can put something out that has a little more shape. But for the most part, when you have really round objects, you know, like a yo-yo or a slimy little ball boy, then you really start to regret having to ink everything, right? That's the bummer. You sketch something out, you blob something out, and then you go, but I have to ink it. Here's the thing. You don't have to ink it. If you got the shape right the first time when you were blobbing, you can just go into your blob layer, select it, copy it, go into your line layer, and then just paste it out. And there you go. You can just, you have the shape, and then what you do then is you erase it using your eraser brush. And then you can use the increased size of the blob composition brush as a natural way of preserving the curves that you liked in your sketch so much. Losing the gesture, the spontaneity, the liveliness of your sketch to the very staid and stale lines of your ink layer is probably the number one lament of most artists. And some artists end up being incredible inkers, and to them I say, well, good for you. That's great. I'm really glad for you. That ain't me. And when it comes to art, there is no one out there who is checking to make sure that you're doing everything by the book. There are no rules. There are no cops in art. You can just take whatever you've previously done and use it and reuse it. It's no big deal. Here we have the eye. What I did there was I pasted it in to the line folder And then in fact, I'll show that again. It was yellow. I went to Filter, Color Adjustments, Hue, Saturation. Then I turned the luminance down completely, and that made it black. That made it into the lines. And then you can just use the eraser tool to finally adjust how thick or thin you would like those lines to be. And if you would like to make the brushes on your tablet a bit harder, make the pen a bit harder, you need a little more, in the way of keeping you from erasing stuff. I get it. You can do that. Oh, other things that I use. I should probably say I'm using the second version of Paint Tool Sci. That's my preferred program. Most programs have roughly the same tools in them. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, they are mostly the same. You don't generally have to find one in particular to just help you draw. Whatever you're most comfortable with is the best art program. So I drew a vein on the leaf there, just making some details. I chose a very simple subject because I wanted you to focus more on the process, digitally speaking, physically. Now I'd like him to look down at the leaf. So I'm going to put that there. As you can see, I use a very soft brush. I like soft brushes. It's part of my trademark style. If you like hard brushes, that's cool too. You can use the binary brush to make a lot of really cool looking drawings. Have hard edges and hard shading and stuff like that. And that's fun too. All right. So we've got the lines all done. That was quick. Got that all finished. We can just take out the sketch layer now. And I'm going to show you something cool. We want to do color now. We want to color our drawing. What I do is I click on the lines folder. All my line layers are in this folder. They're contained in here. And I click on the selection source. And what that does is when I click on the magic wand tool over here, and I hit specified layer down here, and enclosed transparent area, what that does is that allows me to click outside here, and as you can see, it selects all the space outside. Then I can hit selection, invert selection. And you can see I've got a selection here that's just the inside of the drawing, inside the lines. And then what I do there, I have a folder called color. Now, what I like to do, a lot of people like to just color on one layer, and then they will put another layer over that, and they will set it to multiply and put some black or some brown if you're fancy. Whatever. This was very popular in the early aughts. We didn't really know what we were doing back then. Instead, what I have here is the base layer. And on top of the base layer here, I have a bunch of other individual color layers. And I just like to separate them out by basic colors. I'm going to fill in the base here with my base color that's not going to be used. It's just going to be there to show me where the base is. I paint bucketed in there on the current layer, which is the base layer. And then I hit deselect, which is up here. Here, I'll show you. Yeah, it's right here. Now, I set a lot of these functions to my tablet because I use them a lot. They're, I end up doing them quite a bit. Any way you want to do it's fine. If you prefer menus, if you just like crawling around in there, that's fine. But we have the base. Now, why this is important is because now we can take all these color layers and I'm going to select them all just to save time. And I can go up and hit clipping group. And clipping is, you might say clip layer, clipping group, clip some other thing in your program of choice. What this does is if I want to color on this little guy here now, I can just use the brush and it will never color outside the lines because I've already set the base inside the lines, and you can basically never make a mistake. This is very handy. This is great for all kinds of purposes, and you'll get creative later on, and you'll figure out ways to utilize that yourself. Now, if you'll notice, I set up these layers in a specific order just because that's generally how I find that I have to color pictures. Because whatever layer is on top is going to show up over the layer below it. Because I'm using the normal layer mode. That's what happens on normal layer mode. Now I can set the paint bucket as well, if I like. And I do like. I hate coloring things by hand. I hate having to use the brush every time. That's so much effort, so much labor. There's really no point to it. You can save yourself a lot of work. Now I'm going to color in the eye by using the bucket. I set it to specified layer, enclosed transparent area, and boom, there you go. Now, if I had the yellow layer beneath the green layer, we don't get to see it. So you may have to make adjustments here and there, depending on what you're doing. Also, his eye is black, his little pupil that he has there. So I am going to put that over. We're going to zoom in. See, we missed a little bit there. That's why you always need to keep the brushes, just in case. Now, this leaf being the same green as him, it just doesn't work for me. I don't really want it to be like that. So I'm going to choose a different green, a more yellow green that's more organic. Tend to be more like that. I'll choose a little lighter. All right. Then we've got the dark layer there. It's over. And the rest of these layers are probably not going to be used. So we're just going to delete them for the sake of simplicity. And make things a little visually easier to follow. All right. So we've got our colors now. He's actually eating the leaf, so I'm going to take away the parts that intersect. You can see now it's sort of more obvious that he's sort of subsuming the leaf and eating it. That's what he does. All right. So now we've got our colors. There is a folder I have that is also layer clipped, and it is called Shading. It's open right now, but there's nothing in it. Now what I do when I'm ready to shade a picture is I will take all of these color layers. I'll go to Layer, Copy Layer, and I see I made a duplicate of each of those, and then put them in the Shading Layer folder. Now this is cool because what we're going to do next is we're going to click on the folder itself for shading. We're going to hit this button up here that says Create a Layer Mask. Now masks are really cool. What they do is they let you erase things here. In fact, I'll show you. If I were to create a layer mask on the color folder itself, and then I just erased it, as you can see, I'm erasing parts of the color entirely. And I haven't actually erased it. It's still there. The mask is just a transparency layer. It shows you, it stores data in black and white from 0 to 255 or whatever it is. And it's just for transparency. We don't want that right now. That's not useful to us. But I will show you what is useful to us. So I like to do this when I'm picking colors for shading. I'm going to use the rectangle select. I'm going to click into the layer mask for shading. I'm going to hit the erase the selected layers. Now that doesn't destroy the layer. What happens is it's erasing out whatever is there. Now it doesn't look like I did anything immediately. But as I go in, I go to the second green layer above in the shading folder. And I'm going to pick, I know I use a dark theme, so it's a little hard to see, but I'm going to use the hue. I'm going to put that towards blue. I'm going to drop the saturation a little bit, and I'm going to darken it. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the leaf. Towards blue, less saturation, darken it. And what this does for you, I'm going to turn the yellow toward red, make it a little more orange, and darken it. What this does for you is black doesn't need any more darkening. It's straight black. What this does for you is it shows you as you're picking colors what they will look like contrasted with each other. And that's very important because you want to be able to make them all look like they are the same amount of darkness. And that is something that's hard to do mathematically and easy to do visually as a person. You know what things look like because you exist in the world and you don't need to guess. You know, you don't need to look at the numbers and see what the luminance is or the hue is. You can just see it. You look at it. You don't have to pay attention to the numbers unless you're trying to do something the same way twice. All right. So now that we've done that, we are going to, we're just going to erase this rectangle. We're going to take away the layer mask entirely and then put it back, create a new one. I just find that's the easiest way to do it. You could do it another way. You could put in some white and erase the rectangle out. I just find it's easier to delete the mask, create another mask. And then what we do from here on is we are going to shade using the eraser. Now, this is a nice way of doing things because as you can see, you have... Early on, what we would do a lot in the early aughts when we were figuring things out was we would just have the base colors and then we pick a shade and then we go, oh, I'll add some shading down here and then some shading down here and some shading down here. And oh my God, it takes forever because you really want shading kind of everywhere in the image. Let me just undo my way out of this. The way that I like to do shading is subtractively. So you have the whole thing is shaded, and then you can erase out the parts that you want to be highlighted. And this creates a much more holistic looking image because shadow tends to be around every surface. And I use the eraser here. You can actually use any brush you like. If you prefer another different brush for shading, like you want to use a brush or a pencil or an airbrush or whatever, then you would go to that and then you'd hit this switch to transparency. And then as you can see, I can use the sharpness of the pencil, or I can use the blending of the brush, or whatever you like. So again, it's all up to you. It's all up to whatever you like. Selecting transparency for the eraser won't do anything because that's already what it does. I just like to have a particular tool that does that task. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm light mapping where visually where the light is coming in on this little guy. And I'm erasing out everywhere it wouldn't be. And this creates a lot of opportunities, as you can see, as I'm making these little areas over here where the rest of the shading, I don't have to go in and add it, on these little flaps here. I can just have those and they organically form. And I feel that it's just a much more natural way to try to shade things. Now, the thing about Gropey is that he is transparent. His flesh here, his green flesh, does not actually... he doesn't have an eye just on the outside of him. He can, and we'll say that's what's going on with this particular version of the picture. But usually his eye is just floating inside of his body, which is transparent. We'll show you how to do that a little later. It's a bit of an advanced move. But for now, I want to show you how we can... We'd like to add shading back to the eye. But as you can see, when we hit the pencil and use the white, because it's all black and white on the mask layer, as you can see. When we try to add shading back, it's a little messy, It's not that great. We don't want to use that. We don't want to have to do it all manually. It's kind of a pain in the ass. What we do then is we go to the yellow layer. Either one works. They're the same shape. And then we hit Control, click. And what that does is that selects the area where that yellow is. Then we hit go up here and hide the selection. Once you've hidden the selection, then you can go back in and add the shading back. And just like the layer clip, the selection makes it so that you can't draw outside of an area. Now that's really useful because you want to be able to make natural strokes with your arm or wrist or however you draw. Long strokes are better. Practice your long strokes. Eat your vegetables. All that stuff, That's how you do it. But however you do it, that's just an easier way. This will make a lot of stuff way easier for you, and you won't need to just suffer endlessly. And then once we're done, we just deselect that. You won't need to worry about, and then we're going to do it again for the leaf. You won't need to worry about, erasing parts of the shading that you already put in. You won't need to worry about clipping over parts of the drawing that you don't want to do. All the inconveniences of drawing traditionally, you can just skip them. You can just, say, forget it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to deal with that. That's what makes it so nice. That's why I don't do inking. I don't like to do inking whenever possible if it's going to be difficult, despite the fact that I've eaten my vegetables and practiced my long stroke and gotten better at it. I don't like to do inking on really nice natural curved shapes. I prefer to just erase them out and create them that way. And it creates a nice organic looking drawing, and you don't have to go in and use a vector tool or some other fancy thing. Now, I'm going to use the pencil tool to put some shadow back in, just to show that he's on top of the leaf. Everything you do is in service of selling the illusion that this is a real object. And you make all your decisions based on that singular thing. Now, I have gone quite a bit here, and I haven't saved the canvas yet. That's a little dangerous. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to save that. Gropey's lunch. All right. As you can see here, we've got the basic shading down. We've got that all finished. We've got got some soft shading on here. Now, it's basically just cel shading that we've got going. And if you wanted to do that you might use a binary brush instead. You know, for a hard edge for your cel shading, it can look a little bit better. Let me select the eye again to show you the binary brush. Yeah, binary eraser. So that can look pretty cool. That's a different look. You don't have to use that. You don't have to use a soft brush like I do. You can just decide on whatever looks best for your style. I used soft lines, so I'm going to use soft shading. Now, this is just cel shading. This is basically just cel shading, and the most we can do with this is add on a layer of shine. You're just adding on another cel layer, basically. I have a folder called Body Shine. I talked about that earlier, and this is what I like to use it for. I will go in here. I have one layer that's at 100% and another layer that's at 50%. And the 50% makes up the large majority of the shine, makes up the most of the physical space, makes him look a little more shiny. Because he's a blob boy and he's made of slime, and of course he's going to have that look to him. And then once I've made that, I can add another layer of white on top of that and make him look cel shiny. And that's fun, and that's its own look, and that's nice. But let's say we wanted to make him look a little softer. We wanted to make him look a little more integrated into the world. We wanted a little more soft shading. We're going to erase these. I didn't have to, but for the sake of simplicity, it's going to make it a lot easier to do that. So when I'm soft shading, we're going to select in here again and redo the shading for the eye, because the eye is a round object and it makes it easier to explain what I'm talking about. So for a round object like this, the thing about round objects is that the closer you get to the edge, the more hard the shadow's going to be. A lot of people will either go cel shading and it's all hard edges, or they'll go all pillow shading. And what it'll end up being is you just, apply everything's soft everywhere. And it's easier, but it doesn't look very good. It looks all right, but it doesn't really sell that they're there. What you want to do, if you really want things to look more real, is you want to, in the case of this ball shape here, the eye, you soften it near the middle, and then you keep the edge near the edges. Edges for edges. It's a nice, easy mnemonic. And then we're going to do that for the rest of him. As we can see, it's soft near the parts that our eye can see, because all of these parts are largely soft parts, but not all of them are going to be soft shaded because the shadow is gathering on the edges, and we see that soft shading on the edge as a harder edge of shading, harder shadow. Now, I'm not doing a fantastic job. I'm sure there's plenty of people who could do this better. But for the most part, I'm just trying to demonstrate how you can utilize this look more efficiently to make your art look a little more realistic, a little more integrated, the objects a little more part of the world. Now, my shading tends to trend a little dark. You could easily go into the shading folder and drop it down to 50% and have a nice cartoony look to it. this looks like a clip art. This looks like a cartoon, a comic. It's got just enough shading to be more integrated into the world. Looks pretty nice, I tend to prefer a harder shade. And then what you can do with that is, if you would really like, you can do a more integrated soft shine. So we're going to take this shine right here. We're going to make a nice circle. Then we're going to take the blur tool and we're going to work our way around inward. And we've created... You never want to blur it all the way. You never want to blur all the way into the middle, because if you do that, then it's just gone. You can barely see it. It's almost gone. You want to do it as gradually as you can, work your way toward the middle, and then you create these nice areas of blended shine. And the whole thing looks more integrated. Now, a common mistake I'll see happen with this kind of thing is that somebody will make, say, hard shine on a soft shaded picture, and you'll notice that doesn't really look right. And I'm going to tell you why. Because what you have here is the shine, like the highlight, the shading down here, and then the mid-tone. Now, you can have as much shine as you want. You could actually expand this to be as far as you like, depending on the contrast of the image. You could have as much of this color, the highlight, or as much of this color, the shade, as you like. And it doesn't look wrong, because shadows tend to be consistent and highlights tend to be consistent. Having too much mid-tone uninterrupted looks strange. So that's the reason why we want to take this shine and we want to blend it out. Because then we're bridging the gap. I actually misplaced where that should be. We're bridging the gap between the highlight and the mid-tone. You never want very much uninterrupted mid-tone. You want to minimize that as much as possible. You would like to blend it if you're going to blend it. If you're going to cel shade it, don't worry about it. It's fine. You're already using layers of color that are hard-edged, and as long as... The main thing is you want everything to look consistent. And if you can do that, then you're good. Everything else is fine. Now, I use a singular layer. If you want to really try hard, then you can create a third color layer, and you can use that as your way of highlighting. And you can choose individual colors to do that, and I can show you that real quick. Well, we'll see how quick it is. Okay. We're just going to hide this highlight layer. So we've got all our layers here. We're going to put them above into a folder called Highlights. And we're going to have to clip it as well. Now we're going to do the exact same thing that we did before. We're going to create a layer mask so that when we see what colors we're picking, we can go for it. So you'll notice when I was choosing the colors for shading, right? I every color that I chose, when I used green over here, I went toward blue. When I used yellow, I went toward red. The thing this all has in common is that this is all going down toward purple. This right here. Everything, as it gets darker, goes down toward purple in a natural light situation. That's important to understand for shading. If you understand that, you can make intelligent decisions with what shades to use. Now, conversely, when you're going for highlights, because we're going more like brighter in the scale, the color scale, everything should go up toward yellow. So for green here, we're going to go up toward yellow, make it brighter. Yeah, I don't do this that much, so I don't have quite as much practice doing it. Takes me a little while to find them when I go for that. Yellow is obviously yellow. Imagine that. We're just going to make it brighter. And black doesn't get anything once again. Okay. Now, what we're going to do for this, because that's way too much highlight over everything, we put the shading layer back. The shading layer should go over the highlights for simplicity's sake while we're trying to do this. And then we can do a little bit of extra work in a bit with rim lighting. But we'll get there when we get there. With the highlights, we want to use that erase the selected layer feature because we want to start with all dark. And then we can use the pencil tool or whatever you want to use that has the hardest edge. And we add it in. And then we blend it in. And blend it all the way. Very easy to do. And you can see the colors seem a little more integrated when you highlight this way rather than just using white on a layer. You can use the white on a layer, but it's a question of what you want. I'm going to use a smudge tool to blend this out a little bit because it's a very hard edge. It's got a lot of crinkles in it, being a leaf. You can't get a leaf without crinkles. As I was saying, the number one thing you want to understand is that you can use as many steps as you like. You can try and get it as realistic as you like or as unrealistic as you like. Again, there's no rules. You do what you want. Okay. Now, as we see here, the leaf still looks like it's kind of intersecting with our little friend here. What we can do about that is we go to the line layer, we find where we left the lines for that leaf, and we add a mask layer. I told you these things were versatile. And then we just use a gray. That's actually a little bit light still for my liking, so we're going to use darker grays until it looks fully integrated into the little slime boy. And there you go. You've got a transparency effect. Very easily done. No problems, no headache, no fuss, no muss. And there you have it. That's basically how I do most things. This is how you can, I'm going to integrate that a little bit more, I think. The highlights. like I said, you can do this forever. You can just go in a circle, just trying to find the best, most good-looking version of whatever you're trying to do. But what I want to try and point out now is the fact that we talked about how Gropy is actually transparent. Now, there's a lot of ways you can do this. There's a subtractive way. You could take his coloring just in the green area, and you could, like I did before, you could add layer masks. And you could just say, okay, well, we're going to make you translucent in these areas. And then, you know, when you add on the background underneath it, you could see through it a little bit better. You'd have to actually take away from the base area. So we're going to highlight the base, control click that. We're going to remove the dark color, that's the leaf. The eye color, that's also opaque, and the black. And then we're going to make a layer mask out of that. So now we've got, oh, pardon me, I did this actually wrong. That's okay. It doesn't matter if you do it wrong. You can always try again. And then, as you can see here, he's got transparency. And you can see the color through him. You add a little bit of pink and stuff, you know. It's a contrasting color. Might not be the best choice for a picture like this. But you can see the area underneath him now. And the shading goes right along with it when you add the layer mask to it. It's a little involved, but you can get the same look just by doing it to the base, because the base layer is what is the opaque part. The base layer is what makes all the colors above it 100% transparent. And depending on how you want to do it, you can make them more transparent, less transparent. I actually made the highlights transparent. Those should probably stay. Yeah, there we go. This is just one way of achieving transparency. You could also have duplicated the color layer earlier on and just colored in the leaf and the eye in opaque colors, and you could easily get an opaque, a transparent look that way. There's plenty of ways you can accomplish this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a black layer underneath. Well, it's not actually going to be black. I'm going to choose the color of the shading that we picked out. We're going to put it underneath the base layer for the base coloring. And that means that when we have the transparent parts picked out, oh, that's not dark enough. That's okay. We can keep picking colors until we find one that's dark enough. It kind of shows where he is on the table. underneath him as he eats. Let's turn this to a less severe color while we're working. There we go. That looks better. But yes, now we can just use this color to denote where he is contacting the table on, because he's dropping his own shadow onto it, which is creating a darker image. Now this is all pretty advanced. I just wanted to give you a number of things that I like to do. We're going to forego the transparency for now and go back in, and I'm going to show you a little something else called rim lighting. Now, rim lighting is something that's really nice when you want to sell that your object is in the world, because it's not just the light coming down on them that affects them. It's also light bouncing off of the objects that are around them. So we're going to erase out the bottom of the object of our little guy here just a little bit on the shading layer, mask, and then we're going to blend it, make it look nice and soft, because bounce light or rim lighting tends to be very on the edges. Now, this could not be true if, for instance, your character was only lit by a light source behind them, for instance, then this would be the main source of light, and then the bounce lighting would be in the center. You see how he looks like he's kind of got a flashlight underneath him, or behind him rather, and then he's got the bounce light, and that's the only thing lighting up his face. Gives a much more different, much more sinister look to him, actually. But the important thing to absorb here is, if your main light is in the middle, then your bounce light is on the edges. And if your main light is on the edges, then your bounce light is in the middle. It's one of the two. They come from opposite directions generally. Generally. Now, if you have two different light sources, then that's a little more complex. You have to figure that out manually. There's a lot to that. And that's actually why graphics cards exist, because they calculate really, really complex things like that. But you, a human being, have to do it in your brain. And that's why artists deserve to be paid. So, if you wondered, that's the hard part. But that's it. That's the basics. This is generally how I like to draw my images. I hope this was enlightening for you. I hope that you were able to glean some helpful understanding of how I do things and how you could do things in the future a little easier. And that's going to be it for me. Thank you very much.